She had grown up in a house that looked warm from the outside.
But within its walls it was nothing but coldness and cruelty, a place where every smile she offered was met with silence or scorn, and every step she took felt like she was treading on shards of glass. Her family, the very people meant to nurture and protect her, had turned into her tormentors, beating her daily, not just with their fists but with words sharp enough to pierce her soul, reminding her at every turn that she was unwanted, unworthy, and unloved. And yet despite the bruises she carried on her skin and the deeper ones etched into her heart, she never stopped dreaming that life might someday change, that perhaps beyond the fields and fences of her small world, there might be someone who could see her not as a burden but as a human being, deserving of kindness. And that faint hope was the only light that guided her through endless nights of tears and endless mornings of dread. She would rise before dawn to fetch water, cook meals, wash clothes, and labor in silence, knowing that no matter how much she gave, it would never be enough to please those who had long since decided she was nothing more than a slave in her own home. And sometimes, when the pain of their hands stung too deeply, she would sneak to the barn and cry into the hay, clutching her bruised arms and whispering prayers to the heavens, begging for an escape, any escape, even if it meant leaving everything she knew behind. And little did she realize that the answer to her whispered prayers was closer than she dared to believe, for on the edge of the village there lived a man who carried his own wounds, though of a different kind, a widowed farmer whose life had once been filled with laughter and warmth until tragedy stole his wife away, leaving him to wander his land with a heart heavy and a home empty. And though the villagers whispered about his sorrow, they also spoke of his decency, for he was known to treat even his animals with gentleness. And it was this man, this farmer who had endured his own share of loss, who one day caught sight of the girl as she stumbled near his fields, her face shadowed by a bruise she tried to hide, her steps unsteady from exhaustion. And in that moment something stirred in him, a spark of recognition, as though he could see in her pain the reflection of his own grief. And though she quickly lowered her gaze, ashamed to be seen in her brokenness, he could not look away. And from that day on he watched silently, noticing how often she was sent alone to do errands, how often she flinched at the sound of raised voices, and how the brightness of youth in her eyes had been dimmed by cruelty. And each time he saw her, the ache in his chest grew heavier until one evening, when he found her sitting by the roadside, clutching her knees as silent tears streaked down her face. He stopped his wagon and climbed down, his voice low and gentle as he asked her if she was all right, though he already knew the answer. And when she tried to deny it, to hide her pain as she had done for years, her trembling gave her away, and something in the warmth of his gaze broke the dam she had built within her, causing the words to tumble out. Words of years of beatings, words of hopelessness, words of a life that felt like a prison she could never escape. And the farmer listened, not interrupting, not judging, only listening, until she fell silent, her chest heaving. And then he said the words that would change the course of her life forever. "You don't deserve this. You were never meant to live in chains. If you want to leave, I will take you away from here." At first, she thought she had misheard him, thought that surely no one would care enough to risk angering her family. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw not pity, but conviction, the kind of strength that comes from a soul that has known suffering and still chooses compassion. And for the first time in her life, she dared to believe in the possibility of freedom. That night, as her family slept, she gathered nothing but her courage and the memory of his words. And when he appeared at the edge of the road with his horse and wagon, she ran to him with a heart pounding louder than the wind, and he helped her climb aboard, covering her with his cloak to shield her from the chill and from the fear that still clung to her. And as the wheels turned and carried her farther from the house that had never been a home, she felt the chains that bound her begin to fall away, replaced by a fragile but growing hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. Their journey was quiet at first, each lost in their thoughts, she in disbelief that she had finally escaped, and he in silent prayer that he could be the protector she needed. But as the stars glittered above them and the horizon stretched wide, he told her of his wife, of the love he had lost and the emptiness he had carried, and she realized that though their scars were different, they were both survivors of pain, and perhaps together they could begin to heal. When they reached his farm, he showed her not a mansion nor riches, but a humble house filled with peace, where the air smelled of earth and the silence was kind instead of cruel. And as days turned to weeks, she began to laugh again, softly at first, like a bird relearning its song, and he began to smile again, the heaviness in his heart lifting with each moment he saw her grow stronger, and the villagers whispered as they always did, but this time their whispers carried something true, that sometimes broken souls find each other, not to complete what was missing, but to remind one another that even after darkness, light can return. And though the girl knew her past would always be a part of her story, she also knew that it no longer defined her, for she had found someone who saw her not as a burden but as a blessing, and in his presence she discovered what family was meant to be. Safety, respect, and love, and so the girl, who had once been beaten daily by her own blood, was now cherished daily by a man who understood the value of her life, and together they built a future not from wealth or perfection, but from the strength of two hearts that refused to give up. And to anyone listening to her story now, let it be a reminder that no matter how deep the wounds, no matter how heavy the chains, there is always hope beyond the suffering, always the chance to find kindness, always the chance to begin again. So never stop believing in your worth, never stop hoping for freedom, and never stop searching for love that heals instead of hurts. And if you found strength in this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because here we tell stories that inspire, heal, and remind us that even in the darkest night, light can still be found. The first days on the farmer's land were like stepping into a new world for her, a world where silence no longer carried the threat of anger, where footsteps behind her no longer made her brace for pain, where every dawn did not feel like a punishment but instead like a promise. She would rise early still, her body trained by years of harsh routines, but now the chores were different. Not orders barked at her, but tasks she chose to take on, helping in the kitchen, feeding the chickens, carrying buckets of water from the well. And though the work was hard, it did not feel heavy because she was free to pause and rest if she needed, free to breathe without fear of someone's hand striking her, free to smile without it being beaten away. And as she learned the rhythms of life on his farm, she also began to learn the rhythms of peace, something so foreign that at times it frightened her. For she wondered if it could last, if it was real, if someday her family would come pounding at the gate demanding her return. And on those nights when fear crept into her heart, she would find herself on the porch staring out at the fields, the stars glittering above like guardians, and he would often join her, placing a mug of warm milk in her hands, his presence steady, his voice calm as he reassured her that she was safe, that no one could drag her back to the cruelty she had escaped. And though it took time, his words began to take root in her spirit like seeds in fertile soil, reminding her that she was no longer powerless, that she belonged to herself now. And slowly her body stopped flinching at sudden noises, her shoulders straightened when she walked, and her eyes began to shine with something she had not felt in years: hope. The farmer too was changing, for in her laughter, he found the echo of joy he thought had been buried with his wife. In her resilience he saw courage that humbled him, and though he had not expected it, he began to look forward to her presence not just as a companion in his home, but as a light in his life. And yet he kept these feelings close to his chest, not wanting to place